for these resources. And with that, Madam President, I yield the floor, and I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call the roll. Mr. Urquhart.
Madam President.
Senator from Colorado.
Thank you, Madam President. I see that we've been joined by the chair of the Agriculture Committee, the Senator from Michigan, Senator Stabenow, and she just arrived, but I wanted to report to you that before you got here, I'd ask the quorum call be vitiated.
Without.
Thank you. Before the senator arrived, I was talking about the need to pass a farm bill, and the fact that over the break I had traveled 2,500 miles around the state of Colorado in rural parts of our state on the east slope, on the west slope and on the eastern plains, and nobody wanted to talk about anything except why can't we get a farm bill passed. It makes no sense to them. They know it was completely bipartisan here in the Senate. They know it was the only bipartisan deficit reduction that any committee of either chamber has been able to accomplish. In the case of Colorado's farmers and ranchers, we're going through the worst drought that we've had in a generation, and they want to know why Washington, D.C. has a completely different set of priorities than they have. There's still time for this House to pass this bill. This is the first time in modern history that a House Ag Committee has passed out a bill, in this case a bipartisan bill, not as good I don't think as ours, but a step forward, that it hasn't come to the floor for a vote. They cannot even get a vote. So while you're here, I just wanted to say thank you to the chair, and I would say also to the ranking member of the committee, if he were here, for the extraordinary bipartisan effort over the last 2 years that resulted in a very fine bill, but I also think sets a model for the way we ought to be approaching our work in this chamber. So thank you. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Thank you, Madam President. First, I did come to the floor to talk about the urgency of the Farm Bill, but I also want to thank my friend and colleague from Colorado who chairs our Conservation Subcommittee, a tremendous piece of work on the conservation title of the Farm Bill. And thank you for all of that effort. And also to say that I understand what's happening in Colorado, and as you and I know, we passed disaster assistance, a permanent livestock disaster assistance program in our Farm Bill, along with help for fruit growers in Michigan and other places. We are totally committed in the short run to be helping those who have the riskiest business in the world, which is farming and ranching in this country. But we also know that what they want is the certainty, economic certainty, of a 5-year Farm Bill. So I thank my friend for all of his efforts in coming to the floor. And also, Madam President, just want to say, for the record, 10 days until September 30th, 10 days until the Farm Bill expires. And 16 million people in this country who rely on agriculture for their jobs, for their livelihood, are put in limbo. That's the reality of where we are. You know, when we worked so hard together on a bipartisan basis in the Senate to pass a Farm Bill, we did that as quickly as we could so the House would have time to be able to act. We could actually get things done in the summer before we got involved in what was happening in the fall and the end of the year and all of the other critically important issues that have to be addressed. So we passed a bill, as we all know, on a bipartisan basis in June. It took a lot of work, and I continually thank everyone who was willing to hang in there with us to be able to get this done, and my ranking member, Senator Roberts, and our two leaders for giving us the time to be able to do this. We worked hard, and we got it done and sent it to the House, and then the House committee went to work, and they passed out a bipartisan bill. And never before that I can remember, and I've been around here a while, this is my fourth farm bill, have we seen a situation where a bipartisan bill came out of committee and the House wouldn't take it up? Wouldn't take it up in July, beginning of August, wouldn't agree to allow us to negotiate differences over August to come up with a way to be able to get this thing done by the end of this month. And so here we are. The House is leaving today. We are either today or tomorrow or the next day leaving in the Senate. And there's 10 days left on the clock to provide economic certainty for 16 million men and women whose livelihoods come from agriculture. Many of these men and women watched as their crops withered under the hot summer sun this year, as days and weeks went by without a drop of rain in the worst drought in 50 years. And yet, the House Republicans are planning to leave without finishing their work on our farm bill. It's absolutely stunning to me. The work that we did in the Senate passed on a strong bipartisan vote. As I said before, the committee in the House put forward their bill on a strong bipartisan vote. And if nothing happens in 10 days, we begin to see a transition over the next few months to what's called permanent law, which goes back to the 1940s. Now, it's very clear we had over 90 different groups that came in last week. We had hundreds of farmers from around the country that came in. Some got off their tractor, took the time, their own expense, to fly in to say, hey, wait a minute. You know, when there's a job to do, you got to get it done. When the crops are ready to harvest, you don't say, well, I'll wait a month. You got to do what you got to do when it needs to be done. And that's exactly where we are right now. You know, they just need to do it. I'm confident that the chairman and the ranking member, working in a bipartisan way, could do this in a day, Madam President. I really believe that they could do this in a day. And it's not as if there's a lot of other substantive work going on in the House. So just a day, if they just decided today, okay, we're going to just get this done before we leave, create a situation so that our farmers who are planning for next year, who have to go in, sit down with their banker, look at how they're going to plan, will know what tools they have available, that those who have been hit so hard, so devastated by the disasters, every single one of the counties in Michigan, 83 out of 83 counties, has a disaster declaration. And they're looking at us going, thank you for what the Senate did, why won't the House act? And frankly, I don't know why the House won't act. But they should, because they're leaving an awful lot of people hanging. We know that the consequences of not acting begin to unravel a set of policies that need to be in place for production agriculture, for conservation, for local food systems, energy, nutrition. And we know that if we step up and do what we worked so hard to do in the Senate, we will get the added plus of $23 billion in deficit reduction. The only thing that has passed the Senate that is bipartisan deficit reduction is our Farm Bill. And we know that we need to make reforms. That's why we eliminated 4 different subsidies, moved to a risk-based, market-based system based on crop insurance, providing tools for farmers to make sure that they can make their own planning decisions, not plant for government programs, make their own planning decisions, and then have tools to be able to support them, to be able to manage the risks that come. And we certainly know now, we've seen this year, what kind of devastating risks may come for our farmers and ranchers across the country. So we've gone through so many times what's in our Farm Bill. I will not do that now, but except to say that we have more reform In fact, Wall Street Journal said more reform in this farm bill than any in decades, and we're proud of that. We have more deficit reduction than we've passed in anything else. We have policies for the future. We've listened to farmers who said crop insurance is the most important thing for them in being able to manage their risk. We focused on local food systems, the ability for schools to be able to purchase locally, support their local farmers, energy opportunities for the future, bio-based manufacturing where we truly can make things and grow the economy and grow the middle class of this country. Rural development where millions of Americans live, small towns like Clare where I grew up, where the ability to fund infrastructure, water, sewer, internet, have a business loan financed, all those things that go into rural development, telemedicine to create a quality of life and health for seniors and families, all of those things are involved in what we call the Farm Bill. All of those things were passed in the Senate. We did what I believe the American public wants us to do, and I certainly know people in Michigan want us to make tough decisions, evaluate what works and what doesn't work, cut out the duplication. We eliminated over 100 different programs and authorizations, streamlined. That's what folks want us to do, and we did it. And now it's time for the House to do their job. Now, the reality is that even though it says 10 days until the end of the month, the speakers said they're going home with no action. So the real number is 0. Out of time for farmers and ranchers, families. And frankly, for all of us, if we are fortunate enough to have lunch or breakfast today, we ought to care about the Farm Bill and the people that provide us the safest, most affordable, abundant food in the world. That's what we do. We're proud of it. And the House of Representatives should be ashamed of themselves for leaving town without supporting rural America. Thank you, Madam President. I would yield back the time and suggest the absence of the quorum.
Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. Alexander.
Madam President.
Senator from Michigan.
Madam President, I ask that further proceedings under the quorum call be dispensed with.
Without objection, under the previous order, all post-cloture time has expired. The question occurs on the motion to proceed to H.J. Res. 117. Is there a efficient second? There appears to be. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka, Mr. Alexander, Ms. Ayotte, Mr. Barrasso, Mr. Baucus, Mr. Begich, Mr. Bennett, Mr. Bingaman, Mr. Blumenthal, Mr. Blunt, Mr. Bozeman, Mrs. Boxer, Mr. Brown of Massachusetts, Mr. Brown of Ohio, Mr. Burr, Ms. Cantwell, Mr. Cardin, Mr. Carper, Mr. Casey, Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Coates, Mr. Coburn, Mr. Cochran,
You know the plan well.
Ms. Collins, Mr. Conrad, Mr. Coons, Mr. Corker, Mr. Cornyn, Mr. Crapo, Mr. DeMint, Mr. Durbin, Mr. Enzi, Mrs. Feinstein, Mr. Franken, Mrs. Gillibrand, Mr. Graham, Mr. Grassley, Mrs. Hagan, Mr. Harkin, Mr. Hatch, Mr. Heller, Mr. Hoven, Mrs. Hutchison, Mr. Inhofe, Mr. Inouye, Mr. Isaacson, Mr. Johans, Mr. Johnson of Wisconsin, Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, Mr. Kerry, Mr. Kirk, Ms. Klobuchar, Mr. Cole, Mr. Kyle, Ms. Landrieu, Mr. Lautenberg, Mr. Leahy, Mr. Lee, Mr. Levin, Mr. Lieberman, Mr. Lugar, Mr. Manchin, Mr. McCain, Mrs. McCaskill, Mr. McConnell, Mr. Menendez, Mr. Merkley, Ms. Mikulski, Mr. Moran, Ms. Murkowski, Mrs. Murray, Mr. Nelson of Nebraska, Mr. Nelson of Florida, Mr. Paul, Mr. Portman, Mr. Pryor, Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, Mr. Reed of Nevada, Mr. Risch, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Rockefeller, Mr. Rubio, Mr. Sanders, Mr. Schumer, Mr. Sessions, Mrs. Shaheen, Mr. Shelby, Ms. Snow, Ms. Stabenow, Mr. Tester, Mr. Thune, Mr. Toomey, Mr. Udall of Colorado, Mr. Udall of New Mexico, Mr. Vitter, Mr. Warner, Mr. Webb, Mr. Whitehouse, Mr. Wicker, Mr. Wyden. Senators voting in the affirmative: Alexander, Baucus, Begich, Bennett, Bingaman, Blumenthal, Blunt, Brown of Massachusetts, Cantwell, Cardin, Carper, Casey, Coates, Cochran, Coons, Durbin, Feinstein, Franken, Hagan, Heller, Hutchison, Inouye, Johans, Kyle, Levin, Lieberman, Lugar, McConnell, Menendez, Mikulski, Murkowski, Murray, Nelson of Nebraska, Portman, Pryor, Reed of Rhode Island, Rockefeller, Sanders, Shaheen, Tester, Warner, Webb, Whitehouse, and Wicker. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye. Mr. Akaka, aye. Senators voting in the negative: Ayotte, Barrasso, Bozeman, Burr, Coburn, Collins, Corker, Cornyn, Crapo, DeMint, Enzi, Graham, Grassley, Hatch, Isaacson, Johnson of Wisconsin, Manchin, McCain, Moran, Paul, Risch, Roberts, Rubio, Sessions, Shelby, Snow, Thune, Toomey, and Vitter. Mr. Wyden, aye. Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Johnson of South Dakota, aye. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mr. Hoven, aye. Mr. Harkin, aye. Mr. Nelson of Florida, aye. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Lee, no. Mr. Conrad, aye. Mr. Merkley, Mr. Merkley, aye. Mr. Chambliss, Mr. Chambliss, no. Mr. Schumer, aye. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Brown of Ohio, aye. Mr. Kerry, aye. Mr. Leahy, aye. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Ms. Landrieu, aye. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow? Aye.
Are there any senators in the chamber who wish to vote or change their vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 67, the nays are 31. The motion to proceed is carried.
Mr. President,
Majority Leader.
for the last several days I've been telling everyone that we needed to do a couple things before we leave here. We have to do the CR. We have to do the sportsman's package. Now, Mr. President, just a second on the sportsman's package. If you flip to the dictionary and found the word bipartisan, part of that definition would be the Tester sportsman's package, because it's a Republican Democratic bill. It involves hunters and fishers and other sportsmen, off-road vehicles. It's really a good piece of legislation for a group of people who are totally unrecognized here most of the time. So we're going to do those two things before we leave here. To bring us to that result, I've filled the tree and filed cloture on the CR, or will shortly do so. And unless we get consent, the cloture vote on the CR will occur sometime after midnight on Friday, tomorrow, 1 a.m. or thereabouts. Once we invoke cloture on the CR, the 30 hours post-cloture would run about 7:30 a.m. on Sunday, or give or take an hour. And we would vote then to pass the CR, and immediately thereafter we'd vote to invoke cloture on the motion to proceed to the sportsman's package. So here's where that leaves us. We filed cloture on the CR and the motion to proceed to the sportsman's package. That sets up two votes for Sunday morning very early, in addition to tomorrow night, Saturday morning at 1 a.m. or thereabouts. We can do those votes now, finish everything today, or we can wait. The choice is clear. We end up at the same place Sunday morning, or we can get there today. I've had some come to me and say, well, we are not going to vote on the sportsman package. Well, yes, they are. We have that set up, a clear path. Now, the problem with the rest of the stuff, Mr. President, is not our problem. It's the Republicans' problem. I worked out something out in good faith with Rand Paul. He, in good faith, worked something out with me. I'm not here to be a cheerleader for Rand Paul. I'm just telling you what happened. Now, if the Republicans don't want to vote on that, I think it would be too bad, because Rand Paul, after all this time, whether you agree with what he wants to do or not, he and I repeat, in good faith, worked something out. We had a number of senators come here. The senior senator from Arizona is named one, who said he needed more time on that. Mr. President, I have no problem with that. As I said yesterday when he said he wanted more time, I said I just picked the hour because Senator Paul has been here talking about this for weeks and weeks. We've heard a lot from him. And he said, I've talked a lot on this, and I'm paraphrasing. 15 minutes would be enough for me. So I thought it was very generous. We set an hour up rather than 15 minutes. So if senior senator from Arizona wants more time, I don't care. I really don't care. Also, Mr. President, I've had some conversation with Lindsey Graham. He and Senator Lieberman have been have been pushing very hard on a containment resolution that deals with Iran. It's another bipartisan piece of legislation. 80 senators are co-sponsors of it. The other 20, I'll bet, like it also, if not majority of the 20 do. So it's overwhelmingly something we need to do. I think it would be good, and that we have trying to work out things in Iraq, which is not really stable at this time, and at least the way we would want it to be. It'd be nice if America, our country, had an ambassador to go to Iraq. That's been held up. Now, with all the problems we see with Pakistan, I think it would be a good idea that we had an American ambassador to Pakistan. But it's been held up for a long time. And I say this, again to his credit, Senator Paul said, have a vote on the containment resolution. Have a vote on the two ambassadors. He's not standing in the way of that. So, Mr. President, in short, Momentarily, I'm going to file cloture and procedurally block any other amendments from coming on the continuing resolution. We'll vote on that thing whenever the Republicans want, but no later than Saturday morning at a time that we'll decide. And when I say we decide, you know, it's just a statutory clock. That's when it runs out. And then following that, we'll have a vote on final passage of the CR and a motion to proceed to tester. That's what we have to complete. And for people to try to get other stuff here, it's just unfair. I have seen newspaper accounts of Republican senators who love the tester legislation. I didn't ask them. I read it in the paper. They think it's good. Because it is good. It's bipartisan. And it does something we've been trying to do here for a long time, and that is a lot of these little bills that have been held up, hundreds of them, but Tester and the people that support this legislation, they have joined together 20 of these into this one piece of legislation. It's really the right thing to do. And so I hope that we can get this done. Remember, the choice, I repeat for the third time, is very clear. We can complete everything tonight, quickly. Or we can come back here Tuesday morning in the middle of the night sometime and early Sunday morning, and we'll be at the same place. Those votes are going to take place. It's up to the Republicans what they want to do with the Paul unanimous consent request that they objected to on yesterday. Mr. President, I have an amendment to the desk as it relates to H.J. Res. 117.
The clerk will report the measure.
House Joint Resolution 117, making continuing appropriations for fiscal year 2013 and for other purposes.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment number 2844 to House Joint Resolution 117.
Mr. President, on that, I ask for the yeas and nays.
Is there a sufficient second? There appears to be.
I have a second-degree amendment.
Yeas and nays are ordered.
I have a second-degree amendment to the desk.
Clerk will report.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment number 2845 to amendment number 2844.
Mr. President, I now have a cloture motion which I would ask the clerk to report with the permission of the chair.
The clerk will report the cloture motion.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on H.J. Res. 117, a joint resolution making appropriations for fiscal year 2013 and for other purposes, signed by 18 senators as follows.
I ask unanimous consent, Mr. President, that reading the names be waived in this instance.
Without objection, so ordered.
I have a motion to commit the joint resolution with instructions. That has also been filed at the desk.
Clerk will report the motion.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to commit the joint resolution H.J. Res. 117 to the Committee on Appropriations with instructions to report back forthwith the following instructions. Amendment numbered 2486.
I ask for the yeas and nays on that.
Is there a sufficient second? It appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I have an amendment to the instructions.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment number 2847 to the instructions of the motion to commit.
Ask for the yeas and nays on that amendment.
Are there sufficient seconds? There appears to be. The yeas and nays are ordered.
I now have a second-degree amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, proposes an amendment number 2848 to amendment number 2847.
I now move to proceed to calendar number 504S3525.
The clerk will report the motion.
Senator from Nevada, Mr. Reed, moves to proceed to the consideration of calendar number 504S3525.
I have a cloture motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Cloture motion, we the undersigned senators, in accordance with the provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the motion to proceed to calendar number 504S3525, a bill to protect and enhance opportunities for recreational hunting, fishing, and shooting, and for other purposes, signed by 17 senators as follows.
I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory, I ask, first of all, consent that the names not be read.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that the mandatory quorum required under Rule 22 be waived with respect to both cloture motions.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. President, I now suggest the absence of quorum. Oh, I'm sorry, my friend from Wisconsin seeks to be recognized. I have one more thing I need to do. Okay. Mr. President, the President Pro Tem of the Senate is on the floor and seeks recognition.
Mr. President. The President Pro Tem.
Mr. President, I rise today with great sadness.
The President Pro Tem, Senator from Hawaii, is recognized.
Mr. President, today as we near the end of the current fiscal year, the Senate is considering House Joint Resolution 117, a continuing resolution to ensure that the federal government will remain functioning through March of next year in the absence of regular appropriations. Last Thursday, the House passed this measure by a vote of 329 to 91. This bill provides total discretionary spending of $1,047 billion. This is the funding level the Senate Appropriations Committee recommended on an overwhelming bipartisan vote of 27 to 2, and the level agreed to last year in the Budget Control Act. But, Mr. President, this bill is $19 billion more than was approved by the House in the Paul Ryan budget. And so I'm encouraged that the House has finally repudiated its own budget. I'm only sorry that it has taken them this long to come to their senses. One of the primary reasons Congress now faces this CR is that the House broke this agreement on spending. And I want my colleagues to know I support this measure, even though it is far from perfect. In fact, I would say that it is not a good bill. But passing it is much better than allowing the government to shut down over a lack of funding. Mr. President, continuing resolutions are not new. As some of you are aware, I've served in this Senate for 49 years and 9 months. And during my tenure, this Congress has only completed its work and enacted all of its spending bills without needing a continuing resolution on only 3 occasions in 49 years, 3 times. And this is not a record that we should be proud of, but it demonstrates how difficult it is to agree on funding for each of the thousands of federal programs that the Appropriations Committee reviews annually. However, never before in history has the Congress passed a stopgap resolution in September to fund the entire government for half the coming fiscal year. It is unfortunate that it has come to this. 7 months ago, as we began this legislative session, Mr. President, the mood was quite different. There was broad support for acting on appropriations bills. Several members on both sides of the aisle came to the floor to speak about restoring regular order and passing all 12 appropriations bills. Both the Republican and Democratic leaders spoke in favor of considering all our bills. The Appropriations Committee was urged to conduct our budget review as quickly as possible and report bills to the Senate for consideration. And our subcommittees, Mr. President, embraced this challenge. We shortened our hearing schedule, conducted thousands of meetings with executive branch officials and the public, and began to mark up bills shortly after receiving our allocation from the Budget Committee. In most years, Mr. President, the Senate Appropriations Committee begins its markups in June. This year, the committee reported its first 2 bills in April and had 9 bills ready for floor consideration by the end of June. By July, the committee had reported out 11 bills, 9 of which were recommended with strong bipartisan votes, and by that I mean 30-0 or 29-1. Despite the work of the committee, none of those bills have been considered by the Senate. The decision by the House to break faith with the Senate and the administration on funding levels and the inclusion of outrageous legislative policy riders in their bills drained the enthusiasm for acting on those measures. But the real culprit thwarting the efforts of the committee was a handful of my colleagues who insisted on delaying the business of the Senate. Mr. President, we have heard our distinguished majority leader cite the statistics. In 382 instances in the past 6 years, he has been forced to file cloture to break filibusters. It is becoming very clear filibusters are crippling the Senate. This year, this Senate has been in session for 105 days. By my count, on 31 of those days, the Senate has done nothing but consider motions to proceed, as we are doing at this moment, or to invoke cloture. That means nearly 30% of the Senate's time this year has been completely wasted. Moreover, the Senate has only voted on amendments and legislations on 21 of those days that we were in session. On 21 out of 105 days, we actually legislated and worked. For the rest of the time was spent through a backlog of nominations or on breaking filibusters. Mr. President, I've never experienced anything like this in my many years in the Senate. It is true that for some time the use of filibusters has been increasing, but this year it has truly exploded. Mr. President, I do not oppose filibusters. I believe the filibuster is one of the most critical tools we senators have to protect the rights of our constituents. This is especially true for small states like Hawaii, which are at a disadvantage in the House of Representatives compared to states with very large delegations. In fact, Mr. President, the first speech I delivered in the Senate was a defense of the filibuster. I supported the filibuster. And times were different then. For example, I waited until April of that year before speaking on the Senate floor, and I spoke on the filibuster. When I delivered my maiden speech, legendary senators like Everett Dirksen, Richard Russell, Mike Mansfield, and John Stennis were all in attendance. Truly, Mr. President, times have changed. But the most striking difference between then and now is that a filibuster was used very rarely in those early days and only for matters of extreme importance to members and their states. Mr. President, I did not agree with those who used the filibuster in the 1960s to try to stop civil rights legislation. I disagreed with those who used the filibuster against health care reform in 2010. But in both cases, I defended the right to do so. But this year, Mr. President, the Senate has been held up, delayed, and rendered ineffective for at least 30% of its time by the abuse of the filibuster. These filibusters were not to highlight important policy differences, nor were they to protect a senator's constituents. Instead, in virtually every case, they were simply to thwart the ability of the Senate to function. So, Mr. President, today is a sad day. The Senate is forced to take up a 6-month continuing resolution instead of acting upon regular appropriations bills. The bipartisan zeal for regular order last spring has been crushed by dilatory tactics of a few members that have wasted the Senate's time. At some point, this body needs to alter either its behavior or its rules. Mr. President, in addition to discretionary funding, this resolution also provides $99 billion for overseas contingencies, as requested and necessary for the coming year. Further, it continues funding at current levels to pay for disasters under FEMA and to fight fraud, waste, and abuse in the Social Security program. Each of these is consistent with the authorities included in the Budget Control Act. In addition, the bill before the Senate provides only the bare minimum that is necessary to maintain the functions of our federal government. The administration sought approximately 78 proposals to ensure that critical programs and authorities could be continued for the next 6 months. This bill includes only about half of them because the House was unwilling to allow more. Provisions deemed essential by the Secretary of Defense to preserve authorities for ongoing programs in support of our efforts in Afghanistan and Iraq are not in this measure. Special provisions to allow Department of Defense to award contracts for critical programs were denied. Additional funding to activate new federal prisons that currently sit empty was not included. This bill denies necessary authorities for dozens of programs. In some cases, the administration will find cumbersome workarounds. For others, it will have to slow down work on ongoing programs. And this, Mr. President, increases cost and brings about inefficiency. And many programs will simply have to cease activity and await additional action on appropriations bills. We urge the House to include many of the provisions requested by the administration, but they refused. The bill would have been far better and more of the requirements met. Yet, I would point out that the House has not played favorites. No department was granted the authorities it required. Defense Department has not been singled out for special help by House Republicans. If anything, it has been treated more harshly than many of the agencies. And so, Mr. President, I support this bill because opposing it is not a responsible alternative. No one should be interested in delaying or defeating this bill. We simply cannot afford to shut down government operations. So, Madam President, I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this bill, which will preserve our government. It is lean, it is stripped down, but it contains the funding and minimal authorities essential to ensure that the services provided for all Americans can be continued over the coming months. I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The Senator from Mississippi.
Madam President, this continuing resolution results from an agreement reached between the President and the